With the City Mechanical Keyboard meetup just gone actually, I needed something to contribute to the raffle, and not too long ago I gave this painted board in the Bunnings colours for the Melbourne meet. So I thought that I might as well update my painting a mechanical keyboard video. I'm no expert or anything, but I have painted quite a few boards over the years, and this is just the way I do it. So the stuff you need. Wet and dry sandpaper. I have 400, 600 and 800 grit here. You can go higher, but probably not too much lower, and the higher the number is, the smoother it is. Then we have our spray cans. Optional, but I do recommend it, is primer. I have primer filler here because I didn't have the normal stuff, and this is just a bit thicker than like surface of primer or something, but it's just what I had left, and basically what this does is promote adhesion. Sometimes paint doesn't stick the best on some surfaces, and primer kind of bridges that gap. Also, it has the filling properties where we can spray over like scratches and stuff, and it dries very fast and sands down really easily. Next up we have our color paints, and like on these cans it says paint and prime. All spray cans are different, some stick better than others. Apparently there's some sort of primer component to these, so it even says no primer required. So yep, you can just spray straight on if you really wanted to. And finally, the clear top coat, and this just gives that layer of protection over the paint, although it will still scratch. Alright, so you do have to take your keyboard apart. I guess if you really wanted to, you could take off the keycaps and mask everything off, but I always disassemble, and more than likely it will void your warranty, so keep that in mind. Again, all keyboards are different, some easier to take apart than others. I have three main keys for a solid paint job: painting in the right conditions, preparation, and the biggest of all, patience. Having good conditions makes a world of difference. So temperature, I'd say like between 15 to 30 degrees Celsius is fine. Going below and above just makes it a little harder, in particular really cold conditions. Paint takes longer to dry, it doesn't stick as well, and you often get the orange peel effect. So if it is really cold, try and do light coats. Sometimes I even warm up the object and spray can with a heat gun a bit, and of course allow for long drying times. Secondly, painting outside is fine and is great for ventilation, but if it's too windy, it becomes really difficult. When I was painting, there was a slight breeze, so it was workable. Ideally, you would paint indoors, but with good ventilation. A garage is perfect for this, but keep in mind that the excess paint does have to go somewhere, so be careful indoors. Now to preparation. Personally, I do like to give the case a little bit of a sand just to scuff up the surface a bit and remove any sort of coating or whatever, and the idea is that spray will adhere better. I'm using 400 grit wet and dry sandpaper and soapy water to aid that, otherwise the sandpaper will just get clogged up straight away. Depending on your case, you may want to tape off some areas, especially if you have two pieces that join together, as the paint will add thickness. For this, that isn't the case, so I didn't bother. Here's an example with another case where I did have to tape off some bits. I like to start with the flat surface facing down, so when we flip it, we don't have anything touching the paint. I'm painting from maybe 20-ish centimeters away. Obviously, the closer and slower you go, the heavier it will be. I prefer going with lighter coats, so I'm actually kind of fast here. With lighter coats, it dries faster and you're less likely to make mistakes. So this is after that one coat. Again, primer dries very fast, so I gave it like 5 minutes to dry. If there is unevenness, you can just sand it down with something smooth, like 600 grit or higher. If you really want a smooth finish, you can sand after every coat with higher grits. This is after 2 solid coats. It's just enough coverage. I don't want it too thick as it does add physical thickness, and I used 800 grit sandpaper and sanded very lightly, and the finish is pretty smooth to the touch. And the color spraying is just the same thing. So there's 3 main kinds of finishes: glossy, satin, and matte. In my experience, matte paint sticks and goes on very well, and it's pretty easy to use but will show imperfections. Satin is kind of the same case but a bit more forgiving. Metallic paints have been really easy to work with as well because the sparkles also hide imperfections. But glossy is the most difficult to achieve as imperfections show quite clearly. For this, I'm doing a satin-ish textured finish, which I would say is beginner friendly. So light coats and basically don't overspray, take your time, let it dry. Patience is the #1 key in painting because if you touch or overspray, it's just going to add more time to the whole process where you have to let it dry and sand it back and so on. Every can is different, some go on harder and thicker and have better coverage, and even different colors take different times. So when I sprayed with yellow, it took several extra coats to get a good coverage. So really, there isn't a set number of coats that you should do. Just keep going until you have that solid opaque finish, and then another light coat on top of that for good measure. If you make any mistakes, if there's any heavy spots from painting too heavy in particular areas, drips or even dust, let it dry and then sand it back. And you can see that I'm turning it around constantly. This is just because there was a slight breeze and you don't want to go against the wind. And to give it some protection, I gave it 4 coats of clear coat. Since this goes on top, this has a big impact on the finish. I used satin clear coat, and just like the previous spraying, I did light coats, and this gives a textured finish. And here it is, after several hours of drying, and we can clearly see that it's textured, but it is even. And that's the main thing. Whatever finish you go with, if it's even, then it should look pretty good. But we'll have a closer look later, because now to the keycaps. It's essentially the same process. Of course, if you're looking for pure durability, then it's probably not a great idea, as you will wear it down over time. I didn't bother to sand them or anything, since that takes a good amount of time. And also, if you want to still see the legends just a bit, then you don't want to sand it all. Because the surface area is so small on keycaps, you can afford to be a bit less careful as unevenness and imperfections are less noticeable. So really, you can spray on heavier than what I did, which were pretty fast and light coats, and you still should be okay. Now to put it back together, just make sure that it's all dry. Trust me, it's worth the wait. And then you should end up with something like this. We have the red, green/teal and white for the Bunnings colorway. Not perfectly accurate, just what was available at Bunnings actually. And then green and gold for the classic Aussie colors. As said before, I did these boards for the meetups, so it's more for the novelty of it and like a memento, so perfection and durability weren't a huge concern, but it is pretty strong and should last decently well, especially if you went through the steps. So good preparation with sanding and primer. While it isn't necessary, it will create a stronger bond. Then you have the several layers of color on top of that, and finally the clear coat for some protection. But they look pretty sweet. The green and gold one is the Keychron K2, so the sides are aluminium and it works just fine. I did scuff up the aluminium before the primer as well. And here's a reminder that the paint does add thickness and things can be difficult to put together. So keep that in mind, especially with many 2-part plastic cases that clip together, you have to tape up the insides. And yeah, it's just a pretty fun look and it's something you might do to one of your spare keyboards if you have the luxury. You could tape off the top of the keycaps, and I have done that before, but I wanted that full color experience. And I forgot to film it, but the backlighting does shine through on the green and gold one. Anyway, I hope these keyboards are enjoyed by their recipients. Funnily enough, my friend Don from the Board Podcast won one. I'll link his video in the description, but he'll be giving his away in one of his future videos, so make sure you check him out. And lastly, the Sid meet was amazing and we had a crazy turnout. Big thanks to everyone who came, and I'll have a video on that soon.